generation of people that can read but don't necessarily understand. And if you want proof for that, just look at any comments on social media about statements that you just read. And if you understood them, just read down what people have to say, and you'll realize how illiterate our culture is. He said that he read history. He read Will Durant's Story of Civilization, a multi-volume history of the world. He read H.G. Wells' Outline of History. He read Herodotus. He read Arnold Toynbee. And there was a brilliant library that he said would have been the envy of colleges and universities that had been donated to the prison. You can see the divine hand in the education of this man. He said he read philosophy. If you go to Alcatraz and visit Alcatraz, they have a little prison library in there. The books aren't there anymore, but on the wall it says the inmates were particularly interested in philosophy and would check out Kant and other philosophers. He said he read Kant, Schopenhauer, Nietzsche. He was particularly struck by Spinoza. And one of the things that he said, that he felt that Western civilization had ended up in a cul-de-sac. And I don't think it could be summed up any better than that, the crises of Western civilization. But he was once asked, he also got into African American history. He read W.E.B. Du Bois. And he read his about the soul of black folks, and also read Carter Woodson's Negro History. He read a 3-volume book on race and sex and race. He also said that he read Mendel's book on genetics several times, particularly passages from it. And he said the book made clear to him that you could not get a black man from a white man, but you could get a white man from a black man, which substantiated his belief that the first human beings were dark, which according to our tradition, Adam, Udmat al-Ard, Adam is tawny, it means dark, and Hawa means black. So it wouldn't be at all inconsistent with our understanding of the first people, and we now know that they were probably from South Africa. So we're all Africans, right? Tell that to the crackers. You're a mutation. Melatonin deficiency. Some people say that that's part of the problem with the behavior, is it's just a deficiency. I would argue that he had a far superior education to many of the PhDs and college graduates. He definitely knew rhetoric. He knew logic. You can clearly see his knowledge of logic is displayed constantly in his argumentation, his pointing out fallacies, logical fallacies. Somebody accused him of being a communist. He said, why would you conclude that? And he said, you spoke at the socialist, at some venue of communists in New York. He said, I spoke at Dr. King's church. Does that make me a follower of Dr. King? He said, I spoke last week at the Methodist church. Does that make me a Methodist? Right? This is logic. So when he said, every time I catch a plane, I have with me a book I want to read, right? And that's a lot of books these days. If I weren't out here every day battling the white man, I could spend the rest of my life reading, just satisfying my curiosity, because you can hardly mention anything I'm not curious about. I don't think anyone got more out of prison than I did. In fact, prison enabled me to study far more intensely than I ever would have if my life had gone differently and I had attended some college. I imagine that one of the biggest troubles, listen up, Zaytuna students, one of the biggest troubles with colleges is there are too many distractions, too much panty raiding, fraternities, and bula and all that. This man did not get to the Oxford Union, where I spoke at the Oxford Union. When I walked in, they give you a standing ovation just for getting there. You don't even have to give a talk after that. You just wave or something. Just because you're at the Union, they consider it so prestigious, and this is typical Anglo-Saxon pride. They consider it so prestigious that you've been invited there that you get a standing ovation just for walking in, right? So he was there December 3rd, 1963, a beautiful speech that he gave on extremism. He went toe-to-toe with professors from Oxford. The ovations in that speech were immense. His diction was impeccable. His elocution is beautiful. He did not speak slang. If he spoke slang, it was for rhetorical effect, which is actually a trope in rhetoric, is to use "we was robbed." That's a rhetorical trope that can be used. So Malcolm knew rhetoric, and he used it to great effectiveness. He was an extraordinary orator, but he was an educated mind, and this is what has to be understood. This is not something that came down from heaven like manna. This man struggled with great difficulty to educate himself, and he spent years, he would read till 3 in the morning in prison. He would read with the light of the hall. And every 58 minutes he would go because the guard would come by, and they weren't allowed to be up at that time, and he would pretend to be asleep. The guard would leave, and he would go back and start reading again. This was Malcolm. So when you see this man, you have to understand that this is not something that just came down. All of these gifted people, their great gift is discipline. Their great gift is the ability to struggle against themselves and overcome laziness, overcome the temptations to go the easy way. This is what Malcolm was. He was a highly disciplined individual. He was disciplined morally, he was disciplined intellectually, and he was disciplined spiritually. When his brother Reginald was thrown out, he spent the entire night in prayer. So he was a man of prayer. And these are important things to remember. And finally, in conclusion, it would be difficult to... Malcolm died at 39. It's hard to believe that he was so young when his life was taken away. I mean, that's when the prophets begin, at the age of 40. That's when the intellect really begins to mature, and it reaches its real height, during those years. So we don't know what would have happened, and I'm not going to speculate, but one of the last speeches that he gave, and he stopped using black nationalism in that last period because he was struggling with trying to grapple with what the real problem was. And he recognized that there were whites in Algeria that he met, Berbers that are white that he met, that said they didn't resonate with that word, black nationalism. So he was struggling in himself to find something. But he was asked 1 month before he was killed, what do you think is responsible for race prejudice in the U.S.? And Malcolm said, ignorance and greed, and a skillfully designed program of miseducation that goes right along with the American system of exploitation and oppression. So it takes education to eliminate it. And just because you have colleges and universities does not mean you have education. The colleges and universities in the American educational system are skillfully used to miseducate. I couldn't put it better. Thank you.
I think a lot of people are confused by the new Arabic name, El-Hajj Malik El-Shabazz.
I've always had the name on my passport, Malik El-Shabazz, only I only used it in the Muslim world. Well, Hajj is a title that is given to any Muslim who makes the pilgrimage to Mecca during the official Hajj season.
Well, will you now use Shabazz and drop X?
I'll probably continue to use Malcolm X and I'll probably use it as long as the situation that produced it exists.
You don't feel that Shabazz takes the place of X?
My going to Mecca and going into the Muslim world, into the African world, and being recognized and accepted as a Muslim and as a brother may solve the problem for me personally. But I personally feel that my personal problem is never solved as long as the problem is not solved for all of our people in this country. So I remain Malcolm X as long as there is a need to protest and struggle and fight against the injustices that our people are involved in this country.